When you walk into your kitchen and just flip the light switch, you really don't think about the power plant.
No, of course not. You just want the lights on.
Right. You don't pause to consider the miles of copper wiring or like the step-down transformers or the load balancing logistics happening on the grid. You just expect the room to light up. I mean, the technology is essentially invisible.
Yeah, it stops being this marvel of engineering and just starts being an expectation. It completely fades into the background of your daily life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And according to the source we're looking at today, which is the May 25th, 2026 edition of your weekly AI Pulse, we have essentially just hit that exact threshold with artificial intelligence.
We really have. We are officially in what the report calls the operational maturity phase.
Right, which means we're no longer talking about, pulling up some standalone chatbot in a browser window to, I don't know, write a funny poem or summarize an article. AI is rapidly becoming that electrical grid, like the foundational, invisible infrastructure beneath the global economy.
And that is a massive pivot from where we were even just a year ago.
It is. So, okay, let's unpack this, because the core argument of this deep dive is that over the next 2 years, this infrastructure is going to completely rewire everything, from how you search the internet to how global shipping conglomerates coordinate their cargo.
Yeah, the overarching theme here is really that transition from speculative acceleration to industrial operationalization.
Right.
Because for the past few years, the entire tech sector was just obsessed with theoretical capabilities. Like, everyone wanted to know which large language model scored the highest on some standardized benchmark.
Oh, totally. It was all about the test scores.
Right. But now, the market really doesn't care about the benchmark anymore. It cares about execution. It's all about workflow coordination now.
Yeah, and to really understand what that execution looks like, I think we have to look at how we interact with this digital grid every single day. The source material actually spends a lot of time analyzing the recent Google I/O 2026 announcements.
Oh, yeah, that was a watershed moment.
Yeah, it really was. Because the headline there is that the search bar as a concept is just effectively dead.
Right.
Like, search is fundamentally transforming from a retrieval engine into what they call an intelligent execution layer.
Because for decades, the architecture of search was entirely stateless. You'd type in a keyword, the system retrieved human-readable web pages matching that exact keyword, handed you a list of blue links, and then it just forgot about you the moment you closed the tab.
It was basically starting from scratch every single time.
Exactly. But Google's integration of Gemini fundamentally alters that entire architecture. They are positioning Gemini not as a place you go to search, but as this persistent cognitive layer that maintains state.
Okay, meaning it remembers the context of what you're doing.
Yes, across your workspace, your Android phone, Chrome, Maps, it's an ambient AI operating layer. It knows what you're doing across all of it.
I was really trying to wrap my head around this shift, and honestly, the traditional search model feels a lot like walking into a physical library.
Okay, I like that analogy.
Right. You ask a question, the librarian hands you 10 books and says, good luck, figure it out.
Yeah.
You have to do all the reading and the synthesizing yourself.
Yeah, you're doing all the heavy lifting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But this new ambient AI layer is more like having a really proactive executive assistant who has full access to your digital life. Like, they read the 10 books, synthesize the core arguments, check your calendar API to see when you actually have free time to read it, and then draft an email summary to your team.
And crucially, it doesn't just draft that email in a vacuum. Because it's a persistent layer, it understands the specific tone you use with your marketing team versus, say, your engineering team.
Oh, wow. Just based on its ongoing observation of your past workflows.
Right. The system is doing the workflow coordination and the synthesis automatically. Interactions are becoming these multimodal conversational exchanges aimed at actually getting things done, not just locating a piece of information.
But wait, I have to push back here. If we are shifting from those stateless anonymous requests to a stateful, persistent assistant that is just constantly aware of my workflows across literally every device,
Yeah.
how is that not an absolute privacy and governance nightmare? I mean, if it retains context over time, it's essentially logging every single digital move I make. It knows everything.
Well, you're touching on the exact reason why the post-chatbot era requires a totally distinct engineering framework.
Okay.
When you were just sending an isolated prompt to a web interface, the security perimeter is, relatively small. But when you move to a persistent ambient layer, You need entirely new infrastructure. You have to build persistent contextual memory, real-time environment tracking, cross-device orchestration.
All while making sure no one can steal that data.
Exactly. While simultaneously developing zero-trust data architectures, the AI must be able to utilize your personal context without actually pooling your raw data into some centralized training repository.
So it has to compute the context locally then, or at least in some secure enclave on the device, rather than just sending my entire digital life back to the mothership.
Precisely. The challenge is no longer just, can the AI understand the request? The challenge is now, can the system execute the request while maintaining ironclad data control mechanisms?
Which takes on an entirely new level of gravity when we scale this up to the corporate level.
Oh, absolutely.
Because if this persistent layer is managing my personal calendar and my emails, what happens when we hand that same ambient intelligence the keys to a multi-billion-dollar corporation?
Well, the stakes become existential at that point. And this is really where we see the divergence in how major tech players are approaching this infrastructure.
Right, because the report contrasts Google's sort of horizontal ambient strategy for everyday consumers with what SAP just announced at their Sapphire 2026 event.
Yeah, the autonomous enterprise.
Yes, SAP is rolling out the autonomous enterprise, and they are explicitly saying that the era of the digital co-pilot, where, a human asks an AI for advice or a summary, is already over.
It's obsolete in their view.
Yeah, they're moving straight into multi-agent systems. So wait, instead of one massive AI trying to run a company, SAP is essentially building like a digital corporate hierarchy, an AI manager talking to an AI accountant.
That is actually a highly accurate way to visualize it, yeah. It is a shared data environment where specialized, narrowly trained agents trigger specific APIs to coordinate with one another.
Give me an example of how that actually works in practice.
Okay, let's say you have an AI agent monitoring a global supply chain. It detects a weather anomaly that's going to delay a cargo ship at a specific port.
Okay.
In the old Copilot model, the AI just flags this for a human to look at. But in SAP's multi-agent system, the supply chain agent autonomously pings the finance agent via an API handshake.
Wow.
Yeah, it asks the finance agent to calculate the cost of rerouting. Then the finance agent coordinates with a procurement agent to secure new materials from a secondary vendor so the factory doesn't shut down.
Entirely without human intervention.
Exactly. SAP is taking enterprise resource planning platforms, which historically have just been static systems of record, and turning them into dynamic systems of execution.
Okay, but let's pause on the mechanics of that for a second,
Yeah.
because honestly, that brings up a terrifying scenario for any executive listening to this.
The liability issue.
Yes. Let's say this multi-agent system makes a call. It reroutes that fleet of cargo ships based on a predictive weather model, but the model hallucinates, or it just miscalculates.
Right.
And the company loses $50 million on a blown shipping order. Who gets fired?
Well,
I mean, you can't fire an algorithm. Do you fire the engineer who set the parameters? Do you fire the executive who signed the check for the SAP license?
that is the defining bottleneck for enterprise AI right now. We are firmly entering the accountability phase of this technology.
The accountability phase.
Yes. Because over the next 2 years, raw algorithmic intelligence is going to become highly commoditized. Everyone will have smart models.
Right.
So the true competitive differentiator for vendors like SAP or Oracle won't be having the smartest AI. It's going to be providing the most rigorous governance, observability, and operational trust.
Ah. So it's less about having a super genius in the room and more about having a system that meticulously documents every single decision that genius makes.
Exactly. Enterprises require intense auditability. If that cargo ship gets rerouted, the software must generate an immutable log detailing exactly why that API call was made.
Like showing its math.
Exactly. What specific predictive data was weighted, what alternative routes were discarded, and which human-defined parameters actually bounded that decision. Transactional reliability is everything now.
You just cannot deploy autonomous agents in a corporate environment without mathematical certainty that they're going to stay within their operational lanes.
You really can't. It's too risky.
And, if we're demanding that level of auditable transparency and provenance for corporate supply chains, it makes total sense that we are suddenly demanding that exact same provenance for intellectual property.
Oh, the IP space is undergoing a massive revolution right now.
Because this operational shift isn't just optimizing spreadsheets and shipping lanes. It is completely rewiring highly creative, non-linear industries, too.
Yeah, the collision between generative capabilities and intellectual property law is just happening in real time, especially in media and software development.
The music industry is a perfect example of this whiplash. Because, I mean, a couple of years ago, the major labels were in an all-out war. They were resisting generative AI with everything they had.
You're suing everyone.
Right. But according to the Pulse report, the strategy has entirely flipped. They aren't trying to sue it out of existence anymore. They are pivoting hard to monetize it.
It's fascinating.
Yeah, like Spotify and Universal Music have formalized an agreement to license AI-generated covers and remixes.
Well, it is a pragmatic realization by the media conglomerates. You cannot put the generative genie back in the bottle. It's impossible.
Right.
But you can operationalize it. You can build controlled commercial frameworks around it.
And we are seeing it in publishing too, right?
Yeah.
Like Spotify and 11 Labs are pushing audiobooks into this AI-native production era. They are automating the narration, and more importantly, they are automating the localization.
The localization aspect is huge.
It's wild. You can have a book narrated in English, and the AI automatically translates and synthesizes the audio into Spanish, French, and Japanese using the original author's voice clone.
It totally shifts audio production to an AI infrastructure.
Yeah.
And taking it even further, look at software development itself.
Oh yeah, the Google I/O showcase.
Right. They showcased AI that doesn't just, write a snippet of code. It plans the architecture, writes the code, spins up a sandbox to test it, debugs its own errors, and then autonomously commits the pull request.
It's doing the whole job.
Exactly. The traditional software development lifecycle is being compressed to just a fraction of its former length. The human developer is transitioning from basically a typist of syntax to a supervisor of intelligent systems.
I have to point out the extreme irony of this timeline, though.
What do you mean?
Well, for decades, sociologists and tech futurists confidently predicted that AI would replace manual blue-collar labor first, then, administrative data entry, and eventually maybe it would touch creative pursuits.
Right. We thought the robots would do the boring stuff so humans could paint and write music.
Exactly. Instead, the robots are overhauling art, music, and coding first. But my worry here is, if we are automating software development and mass-producing licensed AI music remixes, aren't we risking a massive homogenization of culture and technology?
That's a very valid concern.
I mean, if the same foundational models are generating everything, won't everything eventually sound, look, and function exactly the same?
Well, that fear of cultural and technological homogenization is the exact catalyst driving the next wave of infrastructure development.
Oh, really?
Yeah. To prevent this chaotic sea of generic, indistinguishable content, platforms are evolving into what the report calls AI content governance systems. They are engineering rights-aware generation systems right at the foundational level.
Rights-aware generation, meaning what the AI actually understands the underlying intellectual property it's interacting with, rather than just scraping it blindly.
Correct. When a model generates audio or code now, it isn't just producing a raw file, it is establishing synthetic identity ownership and attaching automated attribution frameworks.
So it tracks who owns what from the jump.
Exactly. Let's say a fan uses an authorized AI tool to create a remix of a Universal Music artist. The infrastructure utilizes cryptographic signatures or metadata tracking to ensure the provenance of that generated stem is recorded, and then the system automatically routes the micro-royalties back to the original creator.
Wow. So it's creating a participatory media economy. Like fans and creators are collaborating with AI, but within strict licensed guardrails that ensure economic attribution actually survives the transition to generative media.
That is the goal. Authenticity and attribution have to be baked into the file architecture itself.
Okay, so we've covered these massive macroeconomic shifts, the enterprise multi-agent systems, the IP governance frameworks. Let's ground this for a second.
Sure.
How does this workflow execution actually manifest on a daily professional level? Like for the listener trying to get their job done, the report profiles this tool called i10x.ai, which seems to perfectly illustrate the death of the blank prompt that we talked about earlier.
Yes. i10x.ai is a highly indicative case study of where professional tooling is headed. It is explicitly not a single-purpose chat product.
Right.
It is a unified AI workspace. It's designed to consolidate content generation, search engine optimization, research, and workflow automation into just a single dashboard.
And what stands out to me about that is how the user interface fundamentally changes our relationship with the AI. Like you aren't staring at a blank text box trying to engineer the perfect magical prompt anymore.
No, not at all.
You select these pre-structured AI agents that are already calibrated for highly specific tasks. I was reading this and it hit me. The era of prompt engineering, which, remember, everyone swore was going to be the most lucrative six-figure job of the decade.
Oh,
It might already be dead.
Well, it was a transitional skill. The friction of having to perfectly instruct a generalized model every single time is simply too high for daily operational use.
It's like we are moving from giving an AI a blank canvas and saying, paint me a masterpiece, which usually results in the AI hallucinating something totally weird,
Right.
to giving it a highly detailed coloring book.
That's a great way to put it.
The coloring book gives the AI hard physical boundaries. It limits the parameters. You aren't asking the system to invent a marketing strategy from scratch. You're just asking it to fill in the text between the locked API lines of the pre-structured agent. The system already understands the necessary operational steps.
And that analogy translates perfectly to the computer science principles at play here. By constraining the system prompts and locking the tool to specific external APIs, you drastically reduce latency and hallucination rates.
It just makes it faster and more accurate.
Exactly. It accelerates productivity for marketers, founders, and creators because they are essentially just hitting play on a predefined sequence. It reduces manual tasks dramatically. However,
There's always a however.
right, this shift toward unified workspaces introduces significant workflow dependence.
Right. If you rely entirely on these pre-structured agents to run your SEO and your content, you're deeply locked into their ecosystem. If their model degrades, your entire workflow breaks.
Which perfectly informs the report's timeline prediction. Over the next 12 to 18 months, we are going to see aggressive consolidation in the AI tooling market.
Makes sense.
All those fragmented single-purpose AI apps, the random summarization tools and specialized image generators people have bookmarked, they will be absorbed or entirely replaced by these comprehensive workspace consolidation platforms.
And the fascinating part is that the long-term winners in this space won't necessarily be the companies with the smartest, highest-scoring AI models, will they?
No, because raw intelligence has diminishing returns in standard business applications. The market leaders will be the platforms that most seamlessly integrate into the daily operational fabric of human work. Utility and reduced friction will always beat a slightly smarter but clunkier model.
Which brings us to the physical reality of all of this.
The hardware.
Exactly. Because running millions of these predefined agents, processing multi-agent corporate API handshakes, maintaining persistent contextual memory for billions of users, this requires an absolutely mind-boggling amount of computing power.
Staggering amounts, yes.
We're essentially building a new global engine room.
So how is the physical infrastructure evolving to keep this operational layer running without just melting down the world's data centers?
This is where the abstract software concepts crash into brutal physical and economic constraints. The infrastructure race has shifted from an open research endeavor into a hyperscale industrial war.
The report highlights Anthropic, which is one of the leading frontier labs, expecting its first profitable quarter. And this is a massive inflection point.
Because for years, the narrative has just been these labs incinerating billions of venture capital dollars to train larger and larger models. Profitability signals that the technology can actually sustain a durable enterprise business model.
Exactly. They are finally proving operational sustainability. But to achieve that profitability, they have to fundamentally change the hardware dynamics. The report notes Anthropic is actively exploring the use of Microsoft's custom-designed AI chips.
Which breaks the single-vendor GPU monoculture. Because for the entire AI boom, it felt like the industry was entirely dependent on NVIDIA hardware.
The diversification of silicon is an economic necessity at this point. And this physical industrialization ties into another symbolic moment the report mentions, Elon Musk's defeat in his lawsuit against OpenAI.
Oh, right.
It effectively marks the death of AI idealism.
The era of AI being an open, collaborative research competition is just over.
It's completely over. It is now a closed-door, capital-intensive infrastructure war defined by strategic alliances with cloud providers and the manufacturing of custom silicon.
So wait, the biggest competitive moat in artificial intelligence right now isn't the underlying math. It's not about having the most elegant philosophical algorithm.
Not anymore.
It's literally just about who owns the most efficient physical silicon chips and has access to the cheapest electricity to run them.
That is the hard truth of what the industry calls inference economics.
Inference economics. Okay, let's break down the mechanics of that, because that seems like the key to this entire maturity phase.
Sure. There are two distinct phases in AI compute. First is training, which is when you feed massive amounts of data into the model so it learns the patterns. That takes enormous concentrated compute power for a set period of time.
Like studying for a test.
Right. But the second phase is inference. Inference is the actual deployment. It is the real-time vector math computations happening every single time a user asks a question or a multi-agent system triggers an API.
So training is building the brain. Inference is the brain actively thinking on the job.
Correct. And if you are going to run millions of persistent professional agents reliably across global supply chains, your inference economics have to be flawless. You cannot have systems that require massive amounts of server power to run every single routine query. It would just bankrupt the provider.
Obviously.
So companies are now prioritizing latency reduction, optimizing the models to compute answers instantly. They are aggressively prioritizing power consumption, reducing the electrical load required per query. They aren't trying to build the most bloated viral model anymore. They are building highly efficient, specialized models that can run constantly in the background without spiking the electrical grid.
It's the difference between building a Formula One race car to break a speed record versus building a fleet of diesel trucks that can haul freight across the country 24/7 without breaking down.
Exactly.
And the venture capital markets are reflecting this reality too, right? I mean, the Seed 100 rankings and the report show that investment capital is rapidly fleeing from those standalone consumer-facing software wrappers and aggressively pivoting toward agentic systems, vertical AI, and the physical infrastructure required to run them.
Smart money always flows toward foundational utility.
So bridging all these threads together, if you are listening to this as an executive or a decision maker managing digital transformation at your organization today, what is the ultimate imperative of this May 2026 Pulse report?
The imperative is that organizations must immediately stop treating AI as a bolt-on feature or, an experimental sandbox project managed by a small siloed team.
The pilot phase is over.
The timeline for integration has compressed. Over the next 2 years, the technology will become entirely ambient. Search is becoming execution. Enterprise software is transitioning from record-keeping to autonomous orchestration.
Everything is connecting.
Yes. And specialized domain-native systems, like an AI model trained exclusively on biochemistry to identify drug compounds, are already vastly outperforming those generalized chatbots.
So the organizations that survive and thrive in this next era will be the ones that redesign their operational workflows entirely around the assumption of persistent intelligence. Like, you don't build a process and then figure out how to add AI to it.
No, that's backward.
You assume the intelligence layer is already embedded in the network, and you architect your business processes on top of that reality.
And that requires a fundamental shift in corporate philosophy. The next generation of market leaders will not simply deploy AI as a tool. They will operate through it. It will be the medium in which all business is conducted.
Operating through it. That perfectly captures the gravity of this shift. It really is the new invisible infrastructure, the new plumbing of the digital world. You flip the switch, and the multi-agent systems just handle the logistics.
The grid is going live.
It really is. And as we wrap up this deep dive into the operational maturity of AI, that reality leaves us with one final lingering question to mull over as you go about your day.
What's that?
Well, if the internet is actively reorganizing into an environment where AI agents are autonomously negotiating with other AI agents, an SAP procurement agent buying supplies from a vendor sales agent, AI tools writing and testing code together, systems licensing synthetic music from each other entirely behind the scenes, what happens to the human experience of the web?
That's the big unknown.
If the vast majority of digital traffic becomes machine-to-machine execution, are we transitioning from being the users of the internet to simply becoming its managers?